what was the most explosive move for fantasy football in free agency? Now we're officially in it. We're officially back on the couch with Jeff Bell. You know him from all kinds of great football guys things, especially Dynasty. But so dynasties being built, maybe fantasy football dynasties, maybe. What move made you the happiest for fantasy?
I don't know if happiest is the right term because I'm being a Bills fan. They have certainly destroyed my heart over and over again. But definitely, I think the most interesting move is Kenneth Walker going to the Chiefs. Just we know that last year, him being in that timeshare with Zach Charbonnet, most of the season we didn't get the full view of what Kenneth Walker could bring to the table. And then on the Chiefs as well, that they couldn't run the ball at all, no matter who they tried. And so you've got a team that we thought they were a dynasty, being in the Super Bowl year after year. They really were a dynasty. And then being able to reset themselves just with one move of addressing that, adding Kenneth Walker, having that element in their offense now to be able to run the ball that is going to open up other things in their offense, passing game, and open up maybe Xavier Worthy, maybe Rashee Rice, maybe whoever it might be, to have some more explosive plays in the passing game because of the explosion that Kenneth Walker brings.
Yeah, it's great because it adds value, right? I mean, if we're talking about a running game where the running backs added almost zero value, negative value, that was the Chiefs. And Kenneth Walker, even though his stats and his efficiency didn't reflect it this year, he's a tackle breaker, he's an elusive back, he's a chunk play kind of back, including in the passing game. Remember, Jerick McKinnon was a league winner in a partial role. Let's not lose the story that the Chiefs offense with Patrick Mahomes basically willing it back to that level was for fantasy fertile again. So when you put Kenneth Walker in that seems to me like, I mean, if someone says second round pick, if someone says I'm going to overpay for Ken Walker in a dynasty trade, overpaying for him today, once we see, look at the numbers he put up in the playoffs as the undisputed number one back. So that's super exciting. What it creates is an interesting question in the wake of it, Jeff, is what about Seattle? Because now that becomes like the plum spot, right? For at least this year, because Zach Charbonnet, who knows when he's going to play George Halani, like exclusive rights free. Okay, you know, what do they have, like Jacardia Wright or somebody like deep, you know? So how are we looking at Seattle? How much are you going to be like a situation guy? We're like, hey, whoever lands there, I'm probably going to be in because I'm in on Seattle.
I mean, yes and no. You would think so, yes. There's got to be somebody, and it's probably somebody not on the roster unless Zach Charbonnet is able to be there by week one. But as we're seeing names tick off, we know Rico Dowdle's off the board. We know that Tyler Allgeier's off the board. I know you've done a great job. You've really been on the depth of this free agent class, but we're getting names ticked off that could be the potential options to come in there. And the draft, I mean, certainly they're not going to be adding Jeremiah Love in the draft. So
wait. Why not? Well, here's the thing. Now, Jeremiah Love may not make it past the Titans at 4 or the Giants at 5 or the Commanders at 7. But now the Saints and the Chiefs at 8 and 9, this is related, right, are out of play. So if he gets past 9, where does the fall stop? You know, it's not, is it Minnesota? They just brought back Aaron Jones. Is it like Chicago at 25? Well, by that point, someone might trade up for him. Who might that someone be? Who has 4 comp picks right now next year and can trade picks from 2027, knowing that they already probably can't keep all the players they're set to draft. So I'm wondering if we're going to see like an absolute, I guess we can't say nuclear bomb anymore. It's kind of these times. We're back to when we were kids. You're a little younger than me, but like 7, 8, 9 was still like the end of the Cold War. The day after the rest said going nuclear. Maybe we shouldn't say that, but Jeremiah Love in Seattle. But if not, what about like Jadarian Price? Or what about, Jeff, just like your favorite third day back? You know, are you going to stick your neck out? Because the word is they're going to take a running back in the first 3 rounds. So how does that change this? If, you know, by each passing day, that should be the expectation. If they're sitting on the sidelines for this free agent class, that tells me they have a different plan.
Well, I think it's fascinating too. You talk about the free fall potentially for me. I see it the other way, where you've got the Saints and the Chiefs saying we were considering Jeremiah Love. We know we're not going to get him because he's not going to get past
Yeah,
that four,
I do think
five,
that's most
seven
likely.
pick,
Anyway, go ahead.
basically. Yeah, and so they know that he's off the board essentially, so they're going to go out and be proactive and add Kenneth Walker, add Travis Etienne to address that. But yeah, you do open up that if he's not a Commander, if he's not a Giant, then there is that potential. And Mike Washington Jr. from Arkansas
Sure.
would be interesting to plug in there, just a big speed power back. And some of it too, you're losing Clint Kubiak, you're obviously got an amazing season from Jackson Smith and Jigba. We don't know why he wouldn't duplicate that, but we do see the Super Bowl hangover sometime, and we see some of the depth. We Boye Mafe leaving, and I think that that's really the interesting conversation about free agency in general, is just the moves on top of the moves of like a Tyler Linderbaum going to Las Vegas, where we thought that offensive line was absolutely horrible. It was horrible with the coaching that they had last year. Now all of a sudden you're putting one of the top centers in the middle there. You're feeling good about Colton Miller at tackle. Jackson Powers Johnson was pretty solid at guard, and all these things, like building on top of the team and being able to be more well-rounded for a guy like Ashton Dempsey. And so I think that just holistically from the football approach is the most interesting thing about free agency. And the other angle of it too is just the changes in coaching staff and seeing
Right.
what we thought traditionally, like what the Chargers have looked like traditionally with Justin Herbert, now with Mike McDaniel coming in, going out, getting Alex Ingold, going out and adding
Yes.
these guys that will allow them to lean on the run game and develop and build a different way. And so we've kind of thought about, it's been a lot of thought exercise of what's going to happen for agency, where these things are going to go. And then now this is really marking when we see that new coaching staff make an imprint on the franchise. We really start to be able to build out. We've been talking about projection models in base camp and being able to build out real meaningful projection models and being able to add those pieces on top. And then also when you're looking from the mock draft angle, you start to get some clarity on some of these pictures being answered or some glaring holes. Like I know the Browns didn't have anybody under contract on the offensive line. Now they've gone out and they've had 4 of the 5 key pieces there. And at the 6th pick, it feels pretty obvious. Like maybe a guy like Spencer Fano out of Utah would be their pick there to answer the one remaining open hole on their line. And so I think this is really the part of the year where we really can start, outside of just abstract thought, conceptualizing what this is going to look like for 2026. And I think that's the most fun part of the offseason.
Yeah, it's again, we're on the couch here with Sigmund Bloom, football guys. By the way, download your rookie guide. It's updated for the combine, free. So if some of these names make you say, it's March, you're listening or watching a fantasy football show, you probably want that free rookie guide. I promise you want that free rookie guide. And what we have here, like you said, is we're on the couch and it's the Rorschach ink blot. It is the idea of, okay, we have the moves teams made, maybe the moves teams didn't make. We hear about maybe moves teams tried to make, and solve for X, X being, well, what does that say about what the team values? What does that say about what the team thinks of what they have? What does that say about what the team thinks about what was out there, and comparing options to each other? And like you said, especially for the new teams, the new regimes, or the teams that are returning regimes but have a hole that they have to address, what should we look forward to? What can we start to, I think it's a really interesting thing, like you're talking about. And I want to say, by the way, that I'm kind of zigging where people are zagging with Seattle and the Super Bowl hangover, simply because, Kenneth Walker, running back, I don't think we're worried about that, losing him. They kept Josh Jobe, they re-signed him, and they let Tariq Woolen walk. That's a comp pick. They let Kobe Bryant walk. That's a comp pick. Their big signing was Rashid Shaheed. So now you didn't squander the picks you spent last year to get him, and it doesn't count against your comp pick formula. You mentioned Boye Mafe. I mean, hey, edge, one of the things that we're seeing in this free agent market, and also you learn so much more about where the meta of football is at the moment. And right now it's like speculative edge rushers, speculative offensive tackles are getting 15 to 20 million. It's like, maybe this guy could work out as a starter. Boye Mafe runs hot and cold, but he provides edge rush presence, and that's worth $16 million a year. That's worth a 4th round comp pick. So they let those 4 guys walk. no signings to cancel those out. Like John Schneider being very intentional. We're going to address corner. I think they like Job better than Woolen anyway. During the season when there were trade rumors, it was Woolen, not Job, that was the subject of those rumors. So I see them recouping those 4 comp picks. Like I said, being able to make a move, like if not Jeremiah Love, maybe for an edge rusher to replace Mafe, or who knows, maybe one of the tackles. Whoever they like, they have the flexibility to do that now. And I don't think any of those players were essential when you write the story of how they were successful. Again, maybe with the exception of Ken Walker, but running backs are replaceable. So tell me another team that when you look at it from that angle, like I'm learning about what this team values. What's another team that was fascinating that made you pause and do some analysis and think about what does this mean for the future?
I think that to me, one of the things I wrote up about our free agent action articles is Wan'Dale Robinson going to the Tennessee Titans and seeing the Tennessee Titans being in a position where obviously make or break year to some regard for Cam Ward, but going out and bring Brian Dable in as offensive coordinator, bringing potentially a top receiver that can allow Cam Ward to have a go-to target. And really the question becomes on Wan'Dale Robinson, how much of that production last year is a wide receiver 16, how much of that production was a lost situation with a young quarterback targeting just one player after a coach had been fired, how much of it was scratching the surface on what Robinson can bring to it. And so seeing that backfield, we know that in spurts and starts, we've had Tajay Spears has looked good. Tony Pollard really had a strong close to last year. That offense in general really had a strong close to last year when they looked lost in the middle of the year. And Cam Ward putting things together towards the end of the year. And it's fascinating how narratives can be set in because he was felt like he's viewed as a bust in the middle of the year. And then all of a sudden, 10-1 touchdown to interception ratio to close out that year just looks like more like that number 1 pick. I think seeing things like that, because we don't usually see a prime wide receiver, age prime wide receiver shift teams outside of some trades like a George Pickens type trade. And so are they able to address that? Does that color how they go with that 4th pick? Is Carnell Tate, does it make them not go to Carnell Tate or go to Carnell Tate to definitively answer that position? I think things like that with the new staff and bringing a player that obviously knows the offense in, filling a massive need there. And it's a little bit, who's really excited about the Titans, but it's just football building in that regard.
No, I kind of am. Or at the very least, if you want me to get you excited, if you're a Titans fan, I have a pretty good narrative I can put together to get you excited, Jeff. Because what's so hopeful about what the Titans did is they brought in a bunch of players who the coaches are familiar with. They brought in players on defense that played under Robert Saleh. They brought in players on offense that played under Brian Dable. Most of them, with the exception of John Franklin Myers, who still is just like a dog, like he's necessary for Robert Saleh's scheme. Okay. 24, 25-year-olds, Cordell Flott, you mentioned Robinson, Daniel Bellinger. So you have guys that are going to come in. They made the trade to Andre Sweat for Jermaine Johnson. You have guys that are going to come in, Jeff, and they're going to say, this is how we do it, to the other guys. This is how we do it. And that's a big deal. Alontae Taylor, I think, is also a great pickup for them in the secondary. I think we've seen Robert Saleh and his value add, whether we look back at the Jets, look at what the Jets defense, what does it represent now with Aaron Glenn? I'm not trying to dunk on Aaron Glenn, but I'm just saying Robert Saleh, not just as a head coach, maybe, because he at least installed a culture there, but as a defensive coach, we saw what he did with the 49ers. And then Brian Dable, and there's no affirmative evidence that Brian Dable's a bad, he's not Shane Waldron or something like that, Nathaniel Hackett, so it's like, let's get down to business. It looks to me like the Titans around Cam Ward. And remember that Brian Dable said getting to work with Cam Ward I think Brian Dable was probably as coveted as Mike McDaniel. I know his fantasy people were like, Mike McDaniel, and we should be. I should pause to say that what you said, because you brought it up and I should have let it breathe, Jeff. You brought it up and it was a good thing to bring up, was the Chargers. And the ink blot there is like, they just told Mike McDaniel, make a shopping list for us. And that's really exciting. So talk a little more about that, because the Titans, yeah, everyone's like, yeah, you can't really get me that excited about the Titans. But the Chargers, yeah, you should be excited about the Chargers.
Well, and really goes back to one of the things that, just touching on Seattle again, one of the things I loved about their draft was that they had a clear identity and they went out and targeted players, and you could tell that they were building really kind of how those Baltimore teams were built when they adding Amon Ware as safety and going out and adding the tight ends. And so I think that the Chargers are also having a very clear picture of what they want to build, and they kind of have floated the idea. We've been between on the Greg Roman offense, and this is how much they run the ball, but really having a specialist in Mike McDaniel that understands the NFL run game and how to structure, how to build that, and then being able to build that complementary piece to those young explosive wide receivers, and getting Lad McConkey back into what we thought he was going to be in last summer, coming into the season, delivering as that number one receiver. Now they have Ingold in there and a little bit more flexibility than what they were playing with at that position last year. They had Tucker Fisk. They kind of were moving around some pieces there, Matlock, and they didn't really have that answer. And I think that that's one of the interesting things about just the Shanahan scheme, Kyle Shanahan's offense with Juszczyk, going back traditionally, having that flexibility of the fullback that can kind of be that fake tight end at times, or to have those different looks, but also having an identity and building towards that. Because I think that that's really just like in life in general, but knowing the identity of what you want to go for and setting yourself up to be able to succeed in that way.
Right, because Greg Roman's offenses, Jeff, are like you storm the castle, rah! You go over the moat and bust down the door, and then you get in the castle, and they look and they're like, Greg, what do we do now? And then he's like, It's like, yes. But Mike McDaniel evolves. Mike McDaniel, there's so much evidence that it isn't just that he has a system and he plugs guys into the system or finds guys that fit in his system. No, it's that he can take what you have and maximize that. And that's what's going to be so interesting about Rondé Gadsden. And you mentioned the young receivers they have there, Trey Harris, Keandre Lambert-Smith. You're retooling the pass offense with a diversity of different kinds of pass catchers. But you add Charlie Kolar, who's an excellent blocking tight end. You add Alec Ingold. Like you said, you have the personnel flexibility. As far as the offensive line goes, you hope you're going to have a healthy Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater. But, they have a hole at center. They are able to go ahead and plug that with Tyler Biotish. And what's important here is that Biotish was released by Washington. Fascinating. You don't see this very often too, where I think he was, I think his per year on his new deal was more than what I think he was due, like $8 million. So he got a raise, I think. Don't quote me on that. But they plug that hole. It doesn't count against the comp pick formula. They bring in Cole Strange, and they retain Trey Pipkins. They retain Trevor Penning. So these are glue guys, swing guys, but they bring in Cole Strange. And what's interesting to me about bringing in Cole Strange is only a 2-year, $13 million deal. So again, not a deal of consequence when it comes to the comp pick formula, but a player that Mike McDaniel had, he coached in Miami. So you like to see that. So you're without messing with the comp pick formula, because Odafe Owe got $25 million a year from Washington. So the Chargers gave up a 5th round pick for Owe. He balled out for them, obviously, and they're going to get a comp third as long as they don't make another significant signing. A comp third, so their draft pick like ripened for the right to play this guy who improved their team in a season that they went to the playoffs. So Joe Horitz, man, one of the masterful moves, the Ryan Poles trade. And, I'm not saying the Bills got fleeced, but for Brian Poles to do that, there's some masterful, imaginative moves in free agency. And I think that Owe trade, and even look at Jalen Phillips, how the Eagles traded a third for him, and they're going to get a comp third back for him going to Carolina. So again, it's just all fascinating, right? Like I feel like, Jeff, if you're in the right mindset, every team, even the teams that didn't do anything, that's meaningful. So let's just hop around. Give me another team that you want to talk about, another team that you spent time thinking about to try to anticipate where the puck's going.
I mean, we've probably got to talk about the Buffalo Bills. I mean, me being a
Yeah.
Bills fan and them going out, and you mentioned it with the Ryan Poles there, but going out and adding DJ Moore, and really, what are the Bills getting in DJ Moore, and what does that Joe Brady offense want out of DJ Moore? Because the philosophy that's been shared publicly the last couple of years has been everybody eats essentially with this Buffalo offense, and so is there going to be buy-in on DJ Moore? What really happened in Chicago? Because that seemed interesting. It seemed to be that as they improved, he got more disenfranchised on everything, and that's always a weird place to be. But what level of play does DJ Moore have left? Is Buffalo going to ask him to be that Stephon Diggs, to be that number one receiver? And I mean, that's an amazing thing for fantasy if they potentially do that. Or is it going to be more of the everybody eats, and this ball is going to be spread around with Shakir, with he's healthy Dalton Kincaid,
Right.
but getting out and addressing that. And so I think that that's really interesting on how they built there, because through the playoffs, it was very, very obvious that they didn't have that go-to player. And you look back at that play with Brandon Cooks, is if DJ Moore is in that position, is that a clear, obvious catch that's made, or is DJ Moore not in the right position given what he did with some of the things in Chicago? So I think that's interesting, just philosophy-wise, on how that allows. And really, I think the wide receiver moves in general are interesting because I'm a big believer. I always say on the Dynasty show,
Mhm.
you're building a basketball team with the wide receiver core, and you think about how a basketball team is structured, and you go to like the LeBron James, that you have all these core pieces in Cleveland when LeBron left, and LeBron was able to make them all make sense. But as soon as you remove that piece, nothing makes sense. And I think that when you do get that actual number one receiver, or a player that can come close to that, a player that can attack at all three levels and do creative with the ball in his hands, that allows players to be in their more natural role supporting position, that makes the whole better than the sum of the parts. And the opposite, when you're asking players that aren't able to do things, then it really can be a difficult opportunity to have success.
Yeah, I think that on DJ Moore, um, although the Bills kind of overpaid, I mean, in the sense that, uh, DJ Moore, the Bears were up against it cap-wise. DJ Moore's cap number was big, like 24,000,000. Um, he seemed superfluous. Luther Burden's good. Colson Loveland's good. Everybody just watching the Bears sees that Caleb Williams and DJ Moore. I mean, it's the sour note the season ended on. How did the Bears season end? DJ Moore and Caleb Williams are not on the same page. So you would have thought that this would have been one of those situations more like Rashawn Gary, where it's like, well, we'll see if somebody will pay for pretty good price for a limited impact player. But the Bills might have been right to do it because I love Matt Harmon, our nephew here at Football Guys, because now he can say these things like, well, I was talking to Josh Allen, and I love him. He's like, well, I was talking to Josh Allen, and he said, I don't really care if I just want you to get open, right? Joe Brady's offense, and Joe Brady knows DJ Moore, like, because Ben Johnson's offense is going to be about discipline and landmarks and timing. And that's not, I mean, DJ Moore had a career year with Justin Fields. So that is applicable or relevant to projecting how he's going to do with Josh Allen, right? I mean, so this is wheels up for DJ Moore. What do you think about what's in the wake? Because why he was superfluous was, again, like there's Adunze, there's Burden, there's Loveland. And then there's also this idea of Caleb Williams, speaking of Josh Allen, that like Caleb Williams has the Josh Allen gene outside of structure late in games. But can he have the Josh Allen gene and like improving enough on the layup throws, improving enough on the throws within structure to get him to the next level? Who helps him do it? So let's look at the Bears in the wake of the DJ Moore trade.
Yeah, and again, that's the interesting part of free agency. A player moves and it works both sides. And so, yeah, the seeing it the way that they played at the end of last year, you really had Luther Burden stepping up. You had Colston Loveland as essentially that go-to slot receiver. Unfortunately, Roma Dunze's contributions dramatically fell off, and so that becomes more maybe the mystery box and what's at play there. And obviously, we know that that was more of an inherited player for Ben Johnson than the going out and targeting Burden and Loveland and seeing those roles there. mean, you open up, you have Cole Kmet now as probably an every down player just about in this new age that
Mhm.
what we're seeing with two tight ends. And so it really opens up the opportunity, obviously, for Loveland and for Burden to, as you're looking at that Ben Johnson offense coming out of what we had with Amon-Ra St. Brown, with Sam Laporta in Detroit, it can allow you to dream now that, maybe Burden is the new Amon-Ra St. Brown. He is going to be a top 12 fantasy wide receiver one, or this is the Laporta that Colson Loveland's going to be a top end tight end. And it has the opportunity for both of those things to be true in the same offense, because we've seen it already in Ben Johnson's offense.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting because Odunze was really strong. It looked like Odunze was gonna have one of the big, massive breakout years early
Yeah.
last year, and then he got hurt, and then also you saw more of shades of 2024 whenever Caleb and, Rome Odunze just weren't on the same page as in the downfield stuff. And then Burden, he looks I mean, the interesting thing and why I'm probably more likely to put a chip if I can only put a chip on one in Dynasty, right? I'm more likely to put a chip on Burden, especially Loveland,
Mhm.
over Odunze, simply because Burden and Loveland were the choices of the new regime, the Ben Johnson regime. And Loveland in particular had that look of, I don't know what it is, Jeff, if it's like the concepts make more sense to Caleb when they're using Loveland, or Loveland just there's something about the trust between them that Caleb Williams' mind understands, like higher chance of success when we're targeting Colston Loveland. Sometimes football can be just that simple. I mean, let's not overthink this. He's the one that's exciting. Go ahead.
Well, it changes the calculus. What you're looking at in the defense when you've got two tight ends out there, and especially when you've got that second tight end that feels more like a slot receiver, because it just changes the look of what the defense usually is giving you, and that's why it's so much trouble for defenses, and that's why you're seeing so many of these, the Harold Fan and those type of
Mhm.
players that teams are looking for. It for years it was I think the fantasy, like in our minds are like, well, John Smith's so explosive. Like this should be able to be something. And NFL offenses were really kind of very, very similar across the board. And they didn't know how to unlock that player. They hadn't figured out how to utilize that role. And then it goes from being every single team is in three wide receiver sets and every tight end has to be on the line. And that doesn't function for a player like that. And it becomes, well, we've got these tweeners. We can use them as the slot receiver. It changes the calculus entirely of what the defense puts on the field. So what Caleb is seeing when he's throwing the ball is different looks. It opens up for that, and especially when, like, I mean, no disrespect at all to Olamide Zacchaeus, but when Olamide Zacchaeus is the wide receiver three there, versus when you've got two tight ends, meaningful tight ends that, one, you can run the ball down a team's throat, but two, they're still very, very good in the passing game. It's you're just throwing into completely different windows.
Yeah, it is pretty exciting to consider the mismatches and consider the way. I mean, and when Ben Johnson comes out with a number 10 pick overall in a much better draft than this year's draft, takes Colston Loveland, a position that positional value devalues. Was Colston Loveland a bad pick at number 10 because tight ends only get paid $20 million near the top of the market? I mean, I hate that talk. Get good players and players that you know what to do with. And Ben Johnson knows what to do with Colston Loveland. And yeah, I mean, as long as the offensive line holds up, and you saw the Bears they bring back Braxton Jones. They trade for Garrett Bradbury. I mean, these are band-aids, okay? But at least after having their center unexpectedly retire and have their left tackle, who hit as a rookie, go down in the playoffs against Green Bay, at least they did something. And I think they brought in Kobe Bryant. They swapped out Devin Bush for a Tremaine Edmonds. That's cheaper. So Ryan Poles has a plan. I mean, sometimes Jeff, like when you're looking at all of the transactions at once, all of the choices, not focusing in on one choice, but all of the choices, you want to see like some internal consistency. You want to see some sense of the team had a plan, and they, just like we do in fantasy, not everything's going to break your way. So you have to have like plan B and plan C, but you can check things off on your list. And where you are giving bad grades, or where the teams maybe had some things happen that they didn't anticipate, and didn't seem to have a plan in place for, or otherwise they're not addressing things that you're looking at their roster and you're saying, how can you not address this? Is there a team like you didn't like? Is there a team that as you were watching free agency unfold, you were like, I think the refrain is something like that's why bad teams stay bad. Any bad team that's going to stay bad because of what went down over the last week?
I thought Atlanta was really curious on what Atlanta did, just in terms of, obviously we know they don't have a first round pick. We knew that they were not going to re-sign Tyler Algier. And I mean, in fantasy land, we're thrilled about them losing Tyler Algier, because what does that open up for Bijan Robinson? But the drumbeat around the team, and that's a team that I cover in the summer for the training camp series, was just all in belief on Michael Penix Jr. And then now you go out and not only do you really kind of nuke that belief in Michael Penix Jr., you very much bring a player that is going to have quarterback controversy around having Tua Tagovailoa there. And obviously new GM, new coaching staff, and everything is new there. And so having that vision, everything's new, but having, we got the Drake London breakout season probably that we were hoping for late in the year. We obviously got the Kyle Pitts season that we were hoping for. They lose Darnell Mooney and they bring in Olamide Zaccheaus. A major question now outside of those two players, what does this passing attack look like? But really, for everything last offseason, and really the position that Michael Penix was drafted into with Kirk Cousins being there. I mean, that's a tenuous position to be drafted into, and everything around there being, this is our guy. It's going to be his team. Kirk Cousins is going to move on, and you immediately go out and maybe they only signed Tua Tagovailoa because he's also left-handed like Michael Penix, so it makes some level of sense. But it also, you're not only not saying belief in your young quarterback that, again, different regime, but you're actively courting those stories about who the quarterback's going to be and putting him in that position of, now you got to go out there and earn your job. And it was up and down play when he was playing, but I think overall largely felt good about what he was putting on the field. But I mean, significant questions around his health throughout his entire career, going back through college, adds another player that's significant questions about Tagovailoa's health. And so maybe it is just, we're hoping that we got one of these guys available. And so maybe that was the move there. But I did think that for a team that really viewed themselves as a playoff team going into the season and were right there at the end, both of the last 2 years, I mean, it's a curious move.
Yeah, what you have here, and I think you're right that if you just step back and look at Atlanta, the sum of their moves, it looks like a team that even in-house is at best wanting to tread water, at best just not drown in the first year of the Kevin Stefanski regime, the Matt Ryan regime, like a potential like go backwards to go forward kind of year. And like you said, for fantasy, it's pretty simple just because the offense is going to be so concentrated on 3 players. If there's a winner here like Pitts, I mean, when Jahan Dotson is an impact signing as a potential starter, then it's Pitts and Robinson and London. And then you bring in Tua. And this was a team that I think was trying to do the Matt Waldman plan at quarterback. What's the Matt Waldman plan at quarterback? Matt Waldman's been saying for well over a decade, like, build a team and take shots at quarterback. Like, remember the year Matt Flynn got signed and the Seahawks traded, I think they had Tavares Jackson, and then they also drafted Russell Wilson in the 3rd round. Like, don't force it. Don't force the quarterback move. Just keep steadily building a team. And Atlanta seemed like they were building a team. But Desmond Ridder was the quarterback, right? I mean, okay, well, let's swing over the other side, throw a bunch of money at Kirk Cousins, draft Michael Penix really high, and they're right back where they started. Now it's Tua Tagovailoa. And could it work? I mean, it could. And what's interesting here is, again, Tagovailoa would be a free agent. So if it works, this is kind of like the Daniel Jones thing. Guess what? Your prize, Kevin Stefanski, Matt Ryan, Ian Cunningham, is you get to decide whether to give Tua Tagovailoa, be the second team to give him like $100 million. That kind of sounds more like a nightmare than a good dream, but maybe he could hit. And I think what's fascinating here is this is on the couch, Jeff, so this is perfect, is Darren Waller goes on Johnny Manziel's podcast. Wow, there's so many sentences that sound random and that are true. Darren Waller is on Johnny Manziel's podcast, but he said, and he brought this book, The Body Keeps the Score, which I read as part of the biggest, like a journey to the change in my journey and understanding trauma, childhood trauma, and how it changes your brain, and how it explains things about patterns in your life that keep happening over and over again, and how to break out of them, how to make new patterns. What's a beautiful book. The Body Keeps the Score. He mentioned the book, and Darren Waller said he thinks that Tua Tagovailoa had so much trauma associated with all these head injuries that he said in practice it's darts, pew, 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 pew. But in games there's a hesitation. I mean, do you think, now we're getting really deep in the weeds of psychology, but it is on the couch.
I'm very excited.
Yeah. Do you think that's the kind of thing that can be rehabilitated like an injury? What do you think of Darren Waller's approach to this? Just watching Tua Tagovailoa, I think this is a really fascinating topic.
I think it's exceptionally fascinating because, so you look last year, the way it was so rocky, he had one fantastic game out of the entire year. It was in Atlanta. And if you look at the journey of Tua Tagovailoa and you flash all the way back to Alabama University, when he came in, the defining moment of his career is coming in at halftime of the national championship game, relieving Jalen Hurts. That was Atlanta. That was that stadium. So like that's very much probably, I would think that's got to be an anchor point of success in his mind at some level of, like this was my moment. Like this is where it all happened. And he came back last year and it was in a spot where we were all on the Dolphins, kind of the falling apart, the trading all the pieces at the deadline. And he goes into that game against the Falcons, and the Falcons were trending upwards as a team that looked like maybe they had put it together, comes out of nowhere, just shocks everything and beats them in that game. And to me, I said it at the time with Dave on the Dynasty show, or Dave Kluge, about, this is a anchor point of success for him, where this is the highest moment of his entire football life was in this stadium. And now he's going in there and playing there every game. And it's, you're switching, you're going from the AFC East to the NFC South, the teams that you're seeing over and over again, completely different. You're not going into Buffalo or into, Gillette Stadium or these other places that you have bad memories. You're going into every day, you're going to work at potentially the highest point of your career.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. I mean, we could do a whole topic on Jalen Hurts too, and what he has traversed psychologically. But I think you're right, and certainly if you had a chance to sit down to Tagovailoa, Jeff, you should tell him that. Tell him that, like, give him the keys to this door you can just draw on the prison that you're in, the mental prison that you're in, because never underestimate, folks. I'm looking in the camera for this, Jeff. It's important. I remembering there's a camera here. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming. By the way, it's a joy to spend time with you, spend time with Jeff. Never underestimate the power of the placebo effect, right? Just like, this is going to work because I believe it's going to work. Well, especially when it comes to things like confidence and making new pathways in your brain and things like that. Hey, this is the stuff, maybe. And quarterback is more, it's primarily a mental, emotional position than a physical position. I think everything about footwork and mechanics, Jeff, it all just follows the mindset. It's not, you can drill the footwork, you can drill the mechanics, but if the mind is off, if the emotions are off in the context of the game, it doesn't matter. So, so many interesting stories. I feel like I get it, like the reveal during the season of what happens in the games and how, it's exhilarating, but I love the reveal of free agency too, because it gives us these things to look forward to. Look, whatever happens with Tua Tagovailoa, whatever happens with Michael Penix, it's going to be revealing and interesting. And now we know the stories. We see penned that first chapter of these teams in the next campaign. It is pretty epic. What else do you want to talk about, Jeff? There's so much. We could pick most any team and probably talk about them for 30 minutes because of how much is revealed and not revealed. What's another team that has been spending time in your head rent free?
Well, let's talk about your team. Let's talk about the Steelers, because I think it's no, you don't want to do that, because I think, I think
please do. I'm just a neurotic Steelers fan, so I don't want people to be like,
it's fascinating though of what happened. And at some level, I think at this time last year, they had a pretty good idea about Aaron Rodgers. And there's a lot out there that Aaron Rodgers just kind of wanted to, he was going to go on his normal sojourn and he just wanted to avoid the media of him not being at Steelers camp, those types of things. But when you're looking at the team that they built around Aaron Rodgers, and it was really, they couldn't really run the ball. And I mean, that's kind of a problem. And I think with an older quarterback, you'd ideally build a strong run game around him. They didn't have any secondary receiver outside of DK Metcalf. They go out and they add Rico Dowdle, who can potentially add that run game element. They take Jonnu Smith out of there, and we, Jonnu Smith's a very interesting player, just the philosophy of around Jonnu Smith, but you also kind of have to be structured in a very, very specific way for Jonnu Smith to do Jonnu Smith things. Now you can allow like Darnell Washington and Pat Freiermuth to be those main pieces there. You can really lean a lot more towards, and bringing Michael Pittman in, you definitively answer that wide receiver. Not only do you do that, he's a good run blocker. He's able to, you add an element onto your team to be able to actually run the ball and support this 40-something-year-old quarterback that really allows him to be successful later into the season. It saves that of the way that they were really kind of, talk about Miami, talk about the Steelers, of just that broken offense that was just had to do things because they could. And like Kenneth Walker, is that part of that on Kenneth Gainwell, that breakout there? Was that the struggle, the version of the struggle targets for Jonnu Smith in Miami, the only reason why there was the Gainwell breakout? And so I think that's fascinating on that. And then I definitely let you go off on that. I think, but just mentioning Gainwell too, Tampa Bay as well, going out, and that's a team that they really involved the run game, the running backs in the passing game 2 years ago. That really fell off last year. And we saw that play from Baker Mayfield really fall off. And we're seeing them. This is what's I love about free agency. There's so many different offshoots that you can just go into, like everything. But you see Mike Evans leave, and now they can, all of a sudden they bring in Gainwell. Now they can structure and build the running back into the passing game again and allow Baker Mayfield to potentially get back there. But definitely didn't mean to sidetrack from you to talk about the Steelers.
No, well, but you're illustrating again one of the things that makes free agency so invigorating, because everything is interrelated. So across teams, even, I mean, look at this Max Crosby thing. We haven't even talked about that yet. We'll save that since that's like a sports talk radio thing. We'll finish with that, because the Ravens are a hated enemy of both of our teams. But it's all interrelated. And it says something about what teams value or what they want to add. I don't even know if Rachaad White's going to get close to $7 million a year. He's still out there. Maybe he'll end up in Jacksonville, maybe in Seattle. Maybe he's the answer to Seattle, but probably not $7 million a year. That's more than Tyler Algier got. And I'm glad, I'm happy for Kenneth Gainwell, but it seemed like he and Aaron Rodgers really had something. Like, if I'm the Steelers and we're doing this thing, like, just push it all in, one more ride. Why not bring back Kenneth Gainwell? Said Rico Dowdle, who's more of a rugged punisher between the tackles, and Jalen Warren actually is a really good receiving back. So, and he had chemistry with Aaron Rodgers too, but it's just an odd move. Bring Michael Pittman, that's great. Like you said, he's a really competent receiver. He doesn't separate against man coverage. Neither does DK Metcalf. How's that going to work? You mentioned struggle targets, Pat Freiermuth. I love Darnell Washington. He gets me excited. All I really care about is if they sign him to an extension. He's my favorite Steeler right now. So I would get his, if you ask me, like, I'm going to give you a free Steelers jersey, I'd probably get Darnell Washington. But then if they don't let him go, that's sad. They're a team, Jeff, that looks to me like they're mistaking. I said this earlier this week with Cecil. They're mistaking an era of mediocrity for an era where they were just one move away. Just if we just had the quarterback, we just had this. No, folks. We talk about some of these teams going backward to go forward, and it's digging out of mistakes previous regimes made. Don't get me wrong, but like, accept your fate. Like the Pittsburgh Penguins, this is happening. By the way, Buffalo Sabres, that's quite a turnaround. But the Steelers are not looking at this like we need to change the blueprint. They're just saying maybe with this combination of moves, it will work. And that just tells me that as it erodes, it's going to get ugly. All right. This Max Crosby thing, as of right now, I don't think there's been another. I mean, what do you think about this? Because this was a real, like, Real Housewives of, or whatever. This was a soap opera, but that's important. I'm not trying to say that it makes it, I'm not trying to say it's frivolous or trivial. I'm trying to say that the emotions, you don't usually see football accounts either personally reflecting the emotions or certainly conveying the emotions. There were some sorry Joes out there from NFL reporters conveying what's going on. What do you think, Jeff Bell?
In my heart of hearts, what do I think that I've got some major questions about Eric DaCosta, probably, but I think that it seemed to me that the Ravens definitely felt like they were a piece away on Max Crosby. They go out, make that aggressive move, but in the wake of that, they start losing Tyler Linderbaum. They start losing Isaiah. Like they start losing all these pieces chip off because of fallout of that move. And then maybe they're kind of looking at it and saying, well, maybe we aren't quite as good as we thought we were. And maybe Max Crosby doesn't quite answer things in the way that we thought that he did. And all of a sudden, now we don't have our first round pick next year, and we don't have the 14th pick in the draft. And meanwhile, we have this other player out here, Trey Hendrickson, just kind of sitting out there and sitting out there longer than maybe we all expected him to be sitting out there. And then all of a sudden, the conversation becomes, well, we could have Trey Hendrickson and 2 first round picks, or we could have Max Crosby. I mean, maybe like the wholesome, wholesome, but like maybe Max Crosby is very, very injured and they're very concerned about that. But at the same time,
No,
that conversation had to have happened of, well, we are losing these picks and we're not quite as good as we thought we would be. And I think the Linderbaum element of it's really interesting because it was really just kind of almost an element of that trade going to the Raiders. He goes into that space that was opened up by Crosby. And part of me was wondering, like, is Tyler Linderbaum is going to pull the JD McKissick here and all of a sudden be a Baltimore Raven now too in the wake of this, but probably in the other part of it, is those conversations with Hendrickson had to have happened before that trade plug was pulled. But the other part is you've lost these pieces now. You've allocated this money now. You look at the market for, if you think you're a team that is able to compete here of impact players in free agency, there's not a whole lot left. And so basically you earmark and I love that it's like the exact same contract that they gave Hendrickson of the contract that Crosby was going to come in on. From what I saw, they were both 4 years, 112 million, like the exact same number basically. So, okay. That conversation had to have happened on, but it really, and I think that in our world, how many people are like, well, yeah, I mean, this happens in my fantasy league all the time. People agree to trades and then they don't follow through. It's like, this is terrifying that you're playing in these leagues, that this is happening all the time, that you have this go-to, that this happens in your league all the time, because this is not a very, very good thing at all. This is really kind of a very bad thing. And I mean, fortunately for the Raiders, having the ability, they were at least wise enough to recognize that nothing's official yet. We need to be able to accept Crosby back into cap space and not blow our entire free agent class up, because they're aggressively trying to build, because they know they're getting Fernando Mendoza and allowing him to be able to have a situation to succeed. So just the ripples and elements of it. But yeah, I mean, it had to have been Trey Hendrickson and 2 firsts or Max Crosby. And when you're sitting down at the table having that conversation after you've lost the pieces that they've lost, I mean, it probably becomes a pretty easy decision.
Yeah. And why I think teams were so mad. Pete Prisco, and say what you will about Prisco, he's sometimes been like an antagonist, like a heel in the football media in a way that I think he relishes. I like Pete Prisco. He said, somebody called it after I said it was economic, linguistic economy, but someone else said haiku. And it's not exactly haiku, but it basically is. He tweeted out, Jeff, 2 first-round picks worth more than league-wide reputation. I was like, wow, that's it, man. You don't need to write 500 words. Have AI do that. Oh, I said it. I was trying to not say those 2 letters right in a row. But anyway, my point is, I think Pete Prisco pretty much summed it up. And I think that from the Eric DaCosta point of view, and you're right, because it's BS. How do you trust the Ravens? Well, I mean, it's 2026. We're in the United States, folks. DaCosta is right to gamble that, everyone's going to have an outrage, and a week later, it's going to come out in the washing machine, and it's just going to go back to business as usual. But I think that DaCosta broke an unwritten rule, which is once these things get out in the media, there's probably, why the teams were so mad, Jeff? This is on the couch. You know why the teams were so mad, Jeff? Because they're like thinking of all the times that they could have done that. That like after they agreed and it went public, but they didn't officially consummate the deal, like all the times that I could have done that when I realized I made a mistake and there was still technically a window to do that, but we have reputations. they're like, oh, why did I do that? And then, could it be a norm changer? Maybe, but we haven't. I mean, we saw Josh McDaniels do this. That's one of the first things that came to mind, right? But it doesn't happen that often. I do think that no teams aren't like, oh, I'm not going to trade with the Ravens now. How dare you? I mean, maybe it can get personal. Maybe if John Spytek is like really mad, who his friends in the league, like Jason Light. Oh, maybe that's where Matt Crosby could end up with Tampa Bay. Where we end up now is off the rails, and this is a great moment for me to say I haven't had, Jeff. I try to get you in the rotation more often for sure. And I love. We talked about this before the show. The like it sounds so ordinary, but it's not ordinary. Just the human decency, Jeff, that you're a wonderful ambassador for our brand because you just radiate a sense of like, I am a decent human being. And I know for you, part of your identity is also, I'm not saying you think of yourself that way, just the way you act, the way you treat other people. And I know a big part of your identity for you is being a girl dad. But that is a term that we hear tossed around a lot. And I don't think we hear nearly enough in-depth discussion of why is that a term? What is that experience like? How does it change you? So I'm going to let you do that.
Yeah, I mean, I have 3 daughters, and it's my wife and 3 daughters, and I think that how it changes, I think it's a very profound thing to think about just the exposure of like looking at my daughters, and all their teachers have been females, and they do dance. Their instructors are all females. Like looking at what is in their world, look the male influence in their world, when you really come down to it, of what they're seeing, and it's me, it's my dad, the grandpa, it's uncles, but like at the same time, it's me, and so I think that's when it comes down to fundamentally of, especially when you've got 3 daughters and no sons, it's like the really the responsibility on me as a father is to shape their relationship with men at some level. And so I think
Absolutely.
that's yeah, in the world that we, and it's there. I mean, there's just so much to unpack. I think like to go into areas like that, but fundamentally that comes down to it, and it is being a decent human. And when they see me, and really kind of the approach of, I've always like social media, those types of things. At some point, this is a time capsule that I'm putting out into the world. And, maybe I'm there, like if I make a mistake, maybe I'm there to explain to my daughters, maybe I'm not, maybe I'm get to a point where not, and that's what you left behind. And so, I mean, that's really the world of social media that we're living in now. You're publishing so much of life and just thoughts and everything. And so everybody that comes across it, I mean, it's two areas of like, one, it could be anybody's first impression, anything that you do, and that those first impressions are so hard. But 2, there's going to be a point in my life, in my girl's life, where they read the things that I've written, where they've and so like to even think about putting something out there that you'd have to try to explain to something or like that, of like, it doesn't even like cross my mind. It's almost just like, I guess maybe the way to describe it is I have celiac disease. I can't eat gluten. And so I get like, somebody will bring donuts into the office and they'll be like, oh, sorry, Jeff, we didn't bring anything. But like in my mind, I can't have donuts. So it doesn't even register that there's a donut there. It's like to that. And so when that decency comes in of like, I mean, there are times where you're like, well, I could be funny and quote tweet this, but at the same time of like, what's the win in that way? What do you gain from that? What's the walk away from it? And then part of it too is, we're all, I watch Ted Lasso kind of a lot, and just because I like to watch happy. It was one of me and Matt Waldman on Audible Live, we talked about just like we watch a lot of happy media because there's a lot in the world that's not. And so like, but like just thinking about, whatever on the other end, somebody's dealing with something that you don't know what they're dealing with, and you don't know why. And so I think that comes as part of it as well. But just knowing the impact that you have, and knowing the lack of other role models in a very real way, it puts that profound responsibility into the girl dad world.
Yeah, I think that you hit on the big thing. We are on the couch. My name is Sigmund. The joke is telling me about your mother. Well, telling me about your father too, but daddy issues. And I think everybody can recall at least one time in their life that they saw a female in their romantic relationships doing things that were just not good for them, that were unhealthy, that can be linked back to some wound or hole left in them by their relationship with their father or the lack of their relationship with their father. And you're right that that is big number one. But also, like you said, when you're thinking about shooting from the hip, ha ha, look at this funny I can make. You're actually thinking about other people's perspective. Joe likes to say that too about what we do here. Like it should be something you're okay with your family seeing, right? And what that means, hopefully, is that you want them to, if they're in so much, one of the funny things about parenting, Jeff, that I'm learning, one of the things I've learned is you're actually planting stuff. It's like planting seeds. Like you don't get to find out for 5 or 10 years whether it actually worked. You're hoping that when they're out on the world on their own, that maybe they remember you told them this. That's actually what you're doing. Don't think about the results now. It's not about the results now. If anything, it's important to downplay the results now. But the thing about what as we're raising our kids is they're learning from us, but not when we're going like this. They're watching us when we're not thinking about how we're a role model. And just the fact that it has allowed you to open up this idea of I'm going to also think about how other people will see this empathy, right? I mean, that's so important. Positivity so important. When I learned that my blood type was B positive as a kid, I was probably like 9 or 10, and I just loved saying my blood type's my philosophy. B positive. But it's true. It's so true. I used to say being negative is its own punishment, being positive is its own reward. And it's a decision you're making. And I want to say to let myself and other people off the hook when you have long stretches. We talked about this, the journey we're on, Jeff. And I think we talk about role models, to like let yourself off the hook when it was hard to be positive, because sometimes it just takes that long to figure it out, and that's okay. Forgive yourself. Can you tell what I'm working on right now? Um, and the idea of allowing yourself to have access to that love that you want to share with other people too. Love yourself the way you love other people. So it's great, but really, I wanted you to give me just one moment, okay? Because what's cool is like if you meet a girl that has like 3 or 4 brothers, it's like, oh wow, you were socialized by boys. But I feel like you, Jeff Bell, are being socialized by females. So what's the moment that like just comes to mind when I say like you too are being socialized? You're changing. You're getting in touch with other parts of yourself. Like what?
Well, it really, I mean, just day to day, or like if I go over to somebody's house and they have sons, and really kind of, it's interesting that this moment of just culture that we're in right now, because a lot of, if you've got kids, a lot of the toys are things from our childhoods. And
Mhm.
so like seeing like the girls that the Barbies that my girls have, or things like that, of like versus like I would go to somebody's house that have sons and it's like, well, there's the Ninja Turtles and there's Star
Yeah,
Wars and they're like those, all those things from when I was a kid. And we're kind of in this pop culture cycle with it. We're bringing all those things back. And so I think that just the juxtaposition probably of like recognizing of the, just really a lot of life comes down to nostalgia. I feel like of parenting comes down
sure.
to nostalgia, and it opens up like it's like thinking about like Christmas when you're before you have kids in Christmas. It's just kind of like one of those things. Well, I have to go to this party and like these things. It's another thing. And versus like when you have kids at Christmas, you are back in the shoes of
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
Christmas mornings and
Hmm.
remembering
Hmm.
like the magic involved in that. And so I think that that's probably in just in a holistically there. And I grew up, I had 2 younger sisters, and I was 12 years older than my youngest sister, but like 3 years older than my other sister. And so like my older sister, we were in similar social groups and kind of running around the same circles and whatnot. But then it gave me two different perspectives on having a sister in similar social settings versus having a sister that's so much more younger than me that, I'd take her to the movies and people probably thought she was my child, and like those types of things when we were like 18 and 5, like those types of
Right,
things.
right.
But I think just seeing, probably seeing the world through girl eyes and living in a girl
Mhm,
house
mhm,
versus
mhm,
going over,
mhm.
and when you experience, and a lot of the times it hits you of what you're living in day to day is just what you need, that juxtaposition to have that profound moment of what your life really is. And so I think that like those types of situations.
Yeah, it's great. Like you said, with children, and not just with children, but through the eyes of children. It doesn't have to be your blood children. You can relive things. I mean, this is all about that in that book, The Body Keeps the Score, that I referred to earlier. Like you're making new pathways, you're making new associations. And like you said, hopefully with a new perspective of you're just extrapolating as you go through life, like, oh, this is what it's like to be a girl, just by
Yeah.
being there in their lives, and that's good for you. We all have a feminine side and we all have a masculine side. And in our next episode, we'll talk about how we can help lonely young men through fantasy football who have been denying the divine feminine and denying that feminine side of their soul. And it's what's causing a lot of hurt. We're here to heal that hurt. We're here to make your fantasy football teams better. We're here because you're so classy.